In the best of the rest of the news, for the next 3 days, hundreds of state lawmakers from all across the country will schmooze and dine with lobbyists right here in Washington, D.C., and plot out ways to take over our democracy. That's because it's time for the annual States and Nation Policy Summit held by the American Legislative Exchange Council, or as it's better known, ALEC. Located smack dab in the middle of Capitol Hill at the swanky Hyatt Regency Hotel, this year's summit comes as ALEC is facing public scrutiny like never before. Earlier this year, a number of high-profile tech companies, including Google, Yahoo, and Yelp, all said they would quit the conservative lobbying group in light of its positions on climate change, specifically denying climate change. So what's on the agenda for this year's ALEC Summit? And what should you know about how ALEC is trying to take over a state government near you? Joining me now for more on this is Jane Carter, labor economist with the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, AFSCME. Jane, welcome.
Thanks.
Great to have you with us. And what was that website again?
Standuptoalec.org.
Standuptoalec.org.
Yes.
Thank you. I wanted to be sure and get that in. So first of all, just recap. What is ALEC?
So ALEC is the American Legislative Exchange Council, been around for 40 years, brainchild of Governor Kasich in Ohio, Ronald Reagan, and Paul Weyrich, basically to go behind closed doors, exile the public and the press, and with corporations on one side of the table, elected officials on the other, come up with model legislation and send them back into their state houses prepared with model bills on voter ID, environmental deregulation, anti-worker, anti-middle class bills that completely decimate the economy, decimate our middle class, solely for profit for corporations.
Wow. And they call it model legislation?
Model legislation. Legislators pay $50 to be a member, and corporations pay between $10,000 to $50,000 to get a seat at the table.
Wow. Gaius Publius wrote a piece recently talking about how the best investment right now in the country is buying politicians. It typically produces a 100-to-1 return at the bottom end, 1,000-to-1 at the top end.
Right. I mean,
is this part of that?
Yeah. Public sector services and asset in this country are worth $6 trillion. So paying $50,000 to get a seat at that table is a drop in the bucket.
Right. To have control over something that is worth billions, and particularly if you can extract that or have that or use it.
Absolutely.
So let's go through some of the topics that they're talking about. Right to work for less. This is ALEC has been all over this for years.
Yeah. So right to work for less was one of ALEC's original model bills 40 years ago, and they have now created this new arm of ALEC called the American City County Exchange, and they're really pushing on ALEC model bills on a local, on your city and county, village, and state and school board level, and right to work is one of those issues. Interesting enough, though, when you talk about right to work, I don't think a lot of the public is aware that in right to work states, families make $6,500 less. In right-to-work states, you have a 36% chance of getting harmed or injured or killed on the job than in a non-right-to-work state. Right-to-work states actually spend about $4,000 less per pupil than a non-right-to-work state. So it doesn't create a better economy. In fact, it completely degrades the local economy and the middle class. Right.
It's basically just union busting. I mean, that's the bottom line here. It's allowing free riders and all these kind of things. And, in fact, I think that we need to roll back Taft-Hartley. No.
Yes, Taft-Hartley is what it's all about.
Mm-hmm. Preemption. This is a polysyllabic word here.
It is.
A lot of people don't know what the heck that means.
So a lot of progressives feel like the November elections were pretty difficult, and we had some few big wins that folks are probably not aware of. We passed minimum wage bills and paid sick days across the country, and that kind of scares a little bit the ALEC members, the corporate members, and so they are pushing an agenda to pass preemption bills across the country to make it so that localities like Seattle or San Francisco could not raise minimum wage on a local level. And it's interesting coming from an organization that really pushes federalism, that they don't want the federal government telling states what to do, but through preemption bills, they basically have the state telling the localities what they cannot do.
It's kind of a variation on what just happened in Denton, Texas.
Right. Yes.
So where the person who's in charge of passing out permits for fracking just said, even though the citizens of Denton voted against this, we're going to ignore them. Wow. Are there any states where they have successfully passed preemption laws, where they pass laws saying that if the local citizens say this is how we want our community, that tough luck?
We've seen them pushed in different places. They've been introduced. We can expect a flood of them this year. There's been a lot of pushback by large companies saying that the minimum wage actually decreases the local economy, when in reality, if you look at it as a labor economist, consumer spending of this country, 70% of the economy is based on consumer spending. When you put more money back in people's pockets, you're going to increase your local local economy. If we raise the minimum wage to just $10.10 across the country, you put $24 billion back into our local governments.
Yeah, which is an immediate stimulus.
Absolutely.
Which helps the guy. You know, it's always occurred to me that every year these conservatives come out and say, oh, you know, we can't raise the minimum wage, it'll kill the economy, whatever. We've had the minimum wage since, what, 1935, as I recall? If there had ever been even 1 year where raising, and the minimum wage has been raised some 30 times roughly, if there had been even 1 year where the minimum wage was raised and the following year there was an economic collapse or disaster or problem or even a hiccup.
Right.
Then, you know, whenever you say minimum wage, they go, 1972, you know, that was but they don't have a year. There is no year.
There's no year. Well, interesting enough, like a lot of folks are you know, talking about the fast food workers striking. If we took just, you know, if you look at McDonald's alone, McDonald's employees utilize $1.2 billion of federal assistance throughout this country. That's a huge burden on the state. You want to get rid of people, you know, utilizing public services like SNAP and food assistance. Then let's look at the wages where not only would they not have to utilize that, they could actually have more buying power in their local economy.
So if we raise the minimum wage, what we're doing is effectively doing away with a corporate subsidy for McDonald's and Walmart and all these other very large low-wage employers, who are the people, not necessarily specifically, but the category of people who fund ALEC, who are trying to prevent that from happening.
Well, so 2 points there. So on average, corporate welfare in this country is estimated to be about $70 billion. That's a huge number. What that means to your neighbors is they're paying about $1,100 a year for corporations to get out of property taxes, to hold on to sales taxes. $1,100 a year, that is more than the average worker's take-home pay. Second, those corporations who are giving money to ALEC to have a seat at that table, to write preemption bills, to write right-to-work bills, those donations, that $50 grand, is to a 501c3 organization, meaning they don't lobby, meaning that contribution is a charitable contribution that they get another tax cut for.
Right, which means that you and I are paying for ALEC,
Absolutely.
too. We're paying, it's amazing. We have just 1 minute left. I understand journalists have been banned from this thing.
Yes.
Are there protests?
So last year there were a few journalists who tried to get in. Dana Milbright tried to get in, and this year The Guardian tried, and they were denied press credentials. So when we talk about, it's not just corporations paying for legislation, doing model legislation. The press and the public are completely cut out of the democratic process. There's a loss of transparency and a loss of accountability. That's not democracy.
Are there, and half the people in the room are legislators, state legislators, state representatives and senators.
Elected officials.
Right. And the other half are lobbyists and corporate officers. There is no transparency. There's no reporting.
Doors are shut.
Doors are shut. And are there any Democrats who show up for these things?
So from the documents that were released last year by The Guardian, it was revealed that there are no Democrats who are actually dues-paying members. However, they do claim it, and they rightfully can, because of the fact that in Iowa and South Dakota, the legislature passed an amendment where the state pays for every legislator there in the state to be a member of ALEC.
Oh, amazing. Jane Carter, it's always great to see you. Thanks so much for dropping by.
Thanks.